3 feet 6 inches tall, fully grown. That's it. That's your height for life. Not from illness, not from hunger. Just your species' normal size. On floors, the grass brushes your chest. A fallen tree comes up to your shoulder. And that Komodo dragon basking 20 feet away. Its head is bigger than your whole upper body. This was everyday life for Homo floresiensis. And honestly, calling them hobbits almost makes it cute. It wasn't. It was brutal. If these stories help you unwind, tap like or subscribe. Also, I'm curious where you're watching from. Drop your city and local time. Last video's comments had Miami, Manchester, and Melbourne back to back. The internet is wild. We love the Tolkien comparison because it sounds cozy and adventurous. But Tolkien's hobbits average 4 feet tall. These people, 3'6". The tallest we've found, 3'7", and that's pushing the max. Most were shorter. One skeleton, LB1, stood 3'6" and weighed about 55 pounds. That's lighter than a typical border collie. An adult human you could literally sling over your shoulder and jog away with. Their brain volume, 400 cubic centimeters. Yours is around 300. Smaller than a chimp's. Closer to early Australopithecines from 3 million years ago. By every measure we use for human ability, they shouldn't have been able to tie their sandals, yet they survived on a predator-packed island for hundreds of thousands of years, made sharp, well-designed stone tools and hunted elephants. Flores in the Pleistocene wasn't a postcard island. It was an evolutionary funhouse where sizes were off the charts. Giant rats around 3 pounds. Storks nearly 6 feet tall. Vultures we still haven't nailed down properly. And at the top, Komodo dragons, as terrifying then as now, just more of them. To Homo floresiensis, they were bite-sized. Now, about those dragons, because the scale mismatch is absurd. Adult Komodos hit 10 feet and around 200 pounds. From a floresiensis point of view, that's a creature 3 times your height and 4 times your mass that can sprint at 13 feet. It has about 60 serrated teeth that replace every 40 days, and venom that triggers shock and stops blood from clotting. Even today, with guns and hospitals, Komodo attacks on modern humans can be fatal. Homo floresiensis had sharp stones. Komodos ambush. They crouch in grass that barely reaches their bellies. But for a 3.5-foot human, that's over your head. They wait at water because everything has to drink. When you get close, they explode from cover. And with your odd, high, stepping gait, thanks to flat feet and unusual leg proportions, there's no long chase. It's just over. And somehow, the dragons weren't the worst problem. Leptoptylos robustus, a marabou stork relative, stood about 180 cm. That's 5 feet 11 cm. This bird could look an adult floresiensis in the eye, and then down. Wingspan around 12 feet. Unlike modern marabou that mostly scavenge, this one actively hunted on land. The fossils place them in the same caves, going after the same food. A modern marabou can swallow prey up to 2 pounds whole. Scale that up and a juvenile floresiensis, maybe 10 to 15 pounds, is well within range. Adults that are 55 pounds wouldn't be gulped in one go. But those beaks are built to tear, not just swallow. If you're 3 feet tall fighting a 6-foot bird over a dead rat, odds are you're losing. Then there were the snakes. Flores has reticulated pythons, the longest snakes on Earth. On Flores, they reach 20 feet. 20 feet of snake versus 3.5 feet of human. They lived in the same caves as Floresiensis. One python found recently measured 6.1 meters. That snake could swallow an adult Floresiensis without much trouble. Add the rest of the island's welcome pack. Spitting cobras that can blind you from 8 feet. Russell's vipers with nasty hemotoxic venom. White-lipped pit vipers, plus 19 species of venomous spiders. Scorpions, and the Asian giant hornet, which kills full-sized modern humans. Everything on this island felt built to hurt you, and you're roughly the size of a kindergartner. Here's the part that breaks our models. Despite being snack-sized, surrounded by predators, and carrying brains we'd call too small for complex planning, Homo floresiensis ruled parts of this island for close to 1 million years. They hunted stegodon, dwarf elephants still weighing over 1,000 pounds. That's like a modern 5-year-old bringing down a rhino with stone tips. The cut marks on stegodon bones make it clear these weren't lucky finds. The angles and depth show systematic butchering. Work you do on an animal you killed. They mostly targeted juveniles, still hundreds of pounds, but less dangerous than adults. A group of Floresiensis going after a young stegodon would be like third graders trying to take down a grizzly. The physics don't add up until you remember they were careful, coordinated, and relentless. The tools back it up. Over 10 zeros and artifacts at Liangbo alone points. Perforators, blades, microblades. Some microblades were likely hafted to wood to make composite weapons. This is not hit two rocks together and hope. This is understanding material, edge geometry, leverage, engineering, with a brain the size of an orange. And the tradition stretches way back. At Matamenge, about 50 miles away, tools from the 840,000 years ago were made the same way. Almost a million years of near unchanged technique. In that same span, other human lines went from choppers to cave paintings. Homo floresiensis found something that worked and never let it go. They also used fire, proved by charred bone and heat, cracked stone. Fire takes planning and patience. You gather fuel before you need it. You keep it going. You understand cause and effect. Our brain models say 400cc shouldn't juggle that many variables. They did, often. The bones at Liangboa are mostly juvenile animals, not random. It shows risk-reward choices. Adults mean more meat and more danger. Young are easier to kill, easier to carry, easier to split for marrow. That's cost, benefit thinking from a brain we keep underestimating. And somehow, despite everything, despite being the smallest, most vulnerable humans we've ever found, they lasted 900,000 years. Modern humans? You 300,000? Neanderthals weigh 400,000. Homo floresiensis nearly tripled us on an island that wanted them gone. Their bodies were odd, even by human evolution standards. Huge, flat feet, more like Australopithecus than us. A foot about a 96 mm on a body roughly 1060 mm tall, proportionally like size, 15 shoes on a 5'6" person. Not shrunken modern humans. Truly different. Their shoulders sat permanently rounded, thanks to short clavicles and a shoulder joint set at a different angle. Humeral torsion around 120 degrees. Ours usually 125, 165 grief. Different throwing, swinging, climbing. They move through floors in ways we're still trying to picture. The wrists are the clincher, the trapezoid bone is pyramidal like an ape's, not boot, shaped like ours. Primitive anatomy from millions of years ago showing up in a species alive until about 50,000 years ago. Like finding a new car with a hand crank starter. It shouldn't be there, yet it is. So what balanced out that tiny brain? Organization might be the answer. Despite small volume, Brodmann Area 10, linked to planning and integration, was proportionally similar to ours. Maybe they did with efficient wiring what we do with bulk. Think super, optimized microchip versus power, hungry mainframe, two paths to the same outcome. Population size makes their survival even harder to explain. Given island resources and hunter-gatherer densities, there may have been only a few thousand Floresiensis at any one time. Maybe a few hundred. Every death mattered. Every birth mattered. They lived right on the edge for an unthinkable amount of time, and never toppled. Getting to floors in the first place required crossing the Wallace Line, one of Earth's toughest barriers. The Lombok Strait drops to about 300 feet, even during ice ages, with fierce currents. Modern boats struggle. Yet somehow, their ancestors crossed 1 million years ago, long before boats. The only workable idea: accidental rafting. A storm or eruption rips a mat of vegetation free. A handful of hominins cling on. Most rafts drift into nowhere. But by raw luck, one washes onto floors after days without fresh water. Congratulations, you've just founded a species. That founding group could be under 100, maybe under 50. Every Floresiensis ever born traces back to them. Inbreeding unavoidable. Founder effect in overdrive. Within a few thousand years, they weren't the same as the mainland population. They were new, cut down to size by island rules. The first generation born on floors, a little smaller than their parents, not much, just a nudge. Then again, and again, less food needed, easier to hide, lower energy costs. The big ones died more often. The small ones survived. Island dwarfism running on fast forward, visible in dozens of generations, not thousands. Their teeth tell a messy story. Jaws shrank faster than teeth, leaving adult mouths crowded. Wisdom teeth often had nowhere to go. Some skulls showed dental traffic jams that would make an orthodontist cry. Its evolution caught mid-transition. Water was a daily gamble. The crocs knew the water holes. The dragons did too. Every trip to drink was a risk. Maybe they used folded leaves or gourds, but carrying water with small hands and short arms isn't efficient. That's multiple dangerous trips just to stay alive. Those famous giant rats, Papagomys armandvilli, weighed around 3 pounds. A chihuahua-sized rodent with grinding teeth built for hard stuff. Not passive prey. They fought back. Hunting them meant close scuffles with something that could shred fingers. At 55 pounds, even a small wound could turn lethal. Plants weren't simple either. Fruit we can reach from the ground might require climbing for them. And their shoulder anatomy suggests a different, less efficient style than ours. Every climb, another roll of the dice. With populations this small, everyone was related. Your dating pool was your extended family. Genetic variety was razor thin. Any outbreak could wipe out the whole species. They survived on a knife's edge for longer than any other known human lineage. Social rules had to be simple and strict. You can't exile anyone when you need every person to hunt, gather and keep watch. Conflict had to be settled now, because splitting the group meant death. Cooperation wasn't optional, it was mandatory. Knowledge transfer was fragile. If the one expert napper died before teaching others, that skill vanished. No writing. Probably limited language. Just demonstration and memory. The fact their tool style stayed stable for hundreds of thousands of years means they somehow protected core knowledge across generations. Despite all the risks, night was pure danger. 3 feet tall, in caves that may hold a 20-foot python. No night vision. No ranged weapons that work in the dark. Fire was the only barrier, but keeping fire alive meant constant fuel runs, out where the predators waited. Survival was logistics on hard mode. Even normal, weather could be deadly. A storm that merely pushes us around could knock over someone weighing 55 pounds. Floods we wade through would submerge them. They needed shelter strong enough to keep them safe, but tight enough to keep predators out. Always a trade-off. Infections, fractures, dental abscesses, parasites. Without medicine, every small issue could spiral. We see healed injuries that must have been miserable. And pregnancy. Mothers the size of 6-year-olds. Babies maybe 1 to 2 pounds at birth. Every successful birth was a minor miracle. Childcare had to be shared. What researchers call alloparenting. But here it wasn't cultural preference. It was the only way babies lived. Flores is volcanic. Lava flows ash, pyroclastic surges lahars. At 3 feet tall, and not fast, eruptions aren't something you escape. Yet they lived through several major ones. Again and again. Storing food. Nearly impossible. No pots, no preservation we can detect. Tropical heat means everything spoils fast. Every day gather, hunt, repeat, competing with animals far better suited to it. No real projectile weapons either, as far as we can tell. Hunting was up close. Within arm's reach. Which means you are in reach too. Taking on a stegodon meant stepping close enough to be flattened. Bravery or desperation, or both. Their tool, making was built for their bodies. Different grip, different leverage, different strike. Modern replicators often fail to match their edges because we're simply not built like them. Their hand and shoulder system shaped their techniques. Yet another layer of skill that had to be passed down. Seasons made everything swing. Dry months, shrinking water, predators and prey jammed together. Wet months, flooding, disease, trouble lighting fires. There was no good season, just different flavors of hard. Navigation at that size changes the whole island. Our easy hill is their climb. Our jumpable stream is their risky crossing. Their mental map of floors would feel alien to us, scaled to smaller bodies facing bigger obstacles. Caves were prized by everyone. Bears, pythons, birds, dragons. A dry, safe cave could be taken while you were out hunting. You might come home and find your home already claimed. Language. Still debated. Tiny brains point to limited speech. But survival required coordination. They had to have some system, gestures, simple calls, to warn of danger, plan hunts, teach tool work. The bones suggest scheduling, kill patterns that match animal routines. They knew when and where certain creatures would show. They worked around predator habits. That's time, base planning, memory and pattern recognition. Once again outpacing our expectations for 400cc. Now about those Komodos. The size gap is ridiculous. Adults reach 10 feet long and around 200 pounds. For a Floresiensis, that's a beast 3 times taller than you and 4 times heavier, charging at 13 miles per hour. They had about 60 knife-like teeth that replaced themselves every month or so, and venom that caused shock and stopped blood from clotting. Even today, with guns and hospitals, Komodo bites can be fatal. These people? They had sharpened rocks. Komodos didn't chase. They ambushed. They crouched in grass that barely brushed their stomachs, but for a 3-foot human was over the head. They staked out waterholes because eventually, everything has to drink. When prey stepped close, they launched out at full speed. And with your awkward, high, stepping gait from flat feet and odd leg bones, you weren't running away. And yet, the dragons weren't even the worst problem. Flores also had Leptoptilus robustus, a massive marabou stork. It stood almost 6 feet tall, looking down on an adult Floresiensis, with a wingspan of 12 feet. Unlike today's scavenging marabus, this one actively hunted on land. Fossils show they used the same caves as Floresiensis and competed for the same food. A modern marabou can swallow prey weighing a couple of pounds whole. Scale that up, and a juvenile Floresiensis, 10 or 15 pounds, is very much on the menu. Adults at 55 pounds weren't being swallowed whole, but those beaks were designed to tear meat apart. If you're 3 feet tall fighting a 6-foot bird for a dead rat, you're losing. And then there were the snakes. Flores is home to reticulated pythons, the longest snakes alive. On this island, they reach 20 feet. That's 20 feet of muscle versus a human 3.5 feet tall. They even lived in the same caves Floresiensis used. One specimen found in a cave was over 6 meters long. That snake could have swallowed an adult whole, and the python wasn't alone. Flores packed a full tropical nightmare kit, spitting cobras that can blind from 8 feet away, Russell's vipers with blood, destroying venom, white-lipped pit vipers, plus 19 species of venomous spiders, scorpions, and even Asian giant hornets, which kill modern full-sized humans. Everything here was designed to kill you, and you were the size of a kindergartner. Here's what makes no sense at all. Despite being snack-sized in a world built to kill them, despite brains smaller than a chimp's, Homo floresiensis survived here for almost 1 million years. That's 3 times longer than us so far, and more than double the run of Neanderthals. They weren't just hiding, either. They were hunters. They went after stegodon, dwarf elephants that still weighed over 1,000 pounds. Think about that. A human the size of a 3rd grader targeting prey the size of a rhino with stone tools. It sounds impossible. Yet the cut marks on stegodon bones say otherwise. These weren't scraps left by predators. The patterns show planned butchering, probably from animals they killed themselves. Most of the bones are from juveniles. That's not random chance. It shows they knew the trade. Off adults meant more food, but way more danger. Young ones were still massive, but easier to bring down and haul. That's strategy. That's risk versus reward thinking. And the tools back it up. At Langbois Cave alone, archaeologists found over 10 zarros and artifacts. Blades, scrapers, points, and even microblades that were probably set into wood handles to make composite tools. This wasn't clumsy rock banging. This was precision. Edge angles, sharpness, durability, they understood it. Even stranger, the tool style barely changed for nearly 1 million years. At Matamenge, about 50 miles away, the same kind of tools appear 40,000 years ago. That's like hitting on a design that works and sticking with it, while the rest of humanity was moving from hand axes to cave art. And they weren't just knapping stone, they were using fire. We know from charred bones and cracked stones. Fire isn't an accident. You need to collect fuel in advance, maintain the flame, and understand what it can and can't do. That takes foresight. That takes planning. Our models say a 400cc brain shouldn't handle that, but it did. Even the bones at Langbois tell us how carefully they thought things through. Most are from juvenile animals. Easier to kill, easier to carry, easier to crack for marrow. That's deliberate decision-making, not random scavenging. And somehow, with brains the size of an orange, bodies the size of children, and predators waiting in every shadow, they managed to last nearly 900,000 years. The physical build of Homo floresiensis is where things get even stranger. Start with their feet. They were huge, flat, awkward, almost ape-like. On a body that stood only 3.5 feet tall, their feet stretched nearly 8 inches. Proportionally, that's like someone 5'6" wearing size 15 shoes. And unlike us, they didn't have a proper arch. Their steps were clunky, high-stepping, and probably inefficient for speed, which means every chase, every escape, was harder for them than it would be for us. Their shoulders told a similar story. The clavicles were shortened, forcing their arms into a hunched, forward position. The angle of their shoulder joint was off compared to ours, giving them a different range of motion altogether. Instead of the fluid rotation we have, theirs was twisted, built more for climbing or swinging than for throwing with accuracy. Imagine moving through the jungle with a body that didn't quite match what we'd call human mechanics. The arms and wrists are where the case really closed that this wasn't a deformed modern human. The trapezoid bone in their wrist. In us it's block-shaped, boot-like. In them it was pyramid-shaped, just like an ape's. Their hand structure was ancient primitive, from a time millions of years before us. You don't get that from a disease. You only get it from deep evolutionary divergence. It's like finding a modern car with a hand, crank starter, technology from another era showing up where it doesn't belong. Their brain case is another paradox, only 400 cubic centimeters, smaller than a chimpanzee's. Yet inside that tiny skull, the wiring was unusual. The frontal lobe, especially the region linked to planning and reasoning, was proportionally as large as ours. In other words, they may have achieved with efficient design what we rely on sheer size for. Think of it like comparing a supercomputer and a bulky mainframe. Different hardware, same outcomes. That could explain how they managed the impossible. Fire control, complex tools, long-term survival strategies. They weren't simply dumb small humans. They were running a different operating system altogether. Even their teeth and jaws show how quickly evolution reshaped them after isolation. Their jaws shrank faster than their teeth did, leaving them crowded and awkward. Wisdom teeth often couldn't erupt properly. Adult Floresiensis had oversized teeth jammed into small mouths. Another sign of evolution caught mid-process. All of this screams that these weren't sick humans. They were something separate, unique, built strangely, moving differently, thinking differently. And somehow, it all worked. Here's the part that almost sounds like fiction. Getting to Flores in the first place should have been impossible. Flores sits beyond the Wallace Line, one of the toughest natural boundaries in biology. It's not some shallow channel you can wade or paddle across. It's the Lombok Strait, a deep trench dropping over 1,000 feet, with brutal currents ripping between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Even today, with boats and motors, crossing it is dangerous. And yet, around 1 million years ago, the ancestors of Homo floresiensis somehow made it. Boats didn't exist. Navigation as we know it didn't exist. The most likely explanation: accidental rafting. Picture a volcanic eruption or earthquake shatters the coastline. Huge mats of vegetation, maybe even chunks of forest, tear away and drift into open ocean. Animals, and a few unlucky hominins, are swept up, cling to whatever they can. Most rafts would vanish into the endless sea. But just once, maybe only once, one raft with perhaps a couple dozen survivors was carried by the currents and slammed onto Flores. Congratulations, you've just founded a brand new human species. The numbers would have been tiny. Maybe 50 individuals. Maybe less than 20. Every Homo floresiensis ever born would trace back to that small, terrified group. The genetic bottleneck would have been extreme. Inbreeding unavoidable. The founder effect running wild. And over thousands of years they shrank. Why smaller? Evolution in overdrive. On an island with limited food. Smaller bodies mean fewer calories. Small bodies are easier to hide from predators. Easier to sustain when resources run low. The big ones died out. The little ones lived. Repeat that cycle for generation after generation, and you end up with adults the size of children. This shrinkage wasn't graceful. Their jaws shrank faster than their teeth, crowding their mouths with oversized molars. Their skeletons looked mismatched, like nature was rushing to redesign them on the fly. And yet it worked. A species of tiny humans, completely unique, born from an accident of geology and chance. Survivors not because of planning, but because the island shaped them into something the world had never seen before. Daily life for Homo floresiensis wasn't just difficult. It was stacked against them from every angle. Water was a constant gamble. The crocodiles knew where the rivers and ponds were. So did the Komodo dragons. Every trip to drink was basically walking into an ambush. They probably used folded leaves or hollowed gourds to carry water. But when you're 3 feet tall with small hands, carrying capacity is laughably limited. That meant multiple dangerous trips each day just to stay alive. Their food supply was equally brutal. Flores was home to giant rats, 3-pound monsters with chisel-like teeth. Think Chihuahua-sized rodents that fought back when cornered. Hunting them meant close combat with something that could seriously injure you. For a 55-pound human, one bad bite could mean infection, which often meant death. Climbing trees for fruit didn't make things easier. Their shoulders were hunched forward, their arms rotated differently, and their grip was odd. They climbed, but not like us, not like chimps either, something in between. Each climb was a gamble. A fall from even 10 feet could break bones that never healed right. And remember, every mouthful of food mattered. With such a tiny population, maybe only a few hundred alive at any time. Every injury, every death was a catastrophe. Raising children was a community effort. The mothers themselves were the size of modern 6-year-olds. Giving birth was dangerous. Babies were maybe 1 or 2 pounds, fragile, helpless for far longer than animal young. A mother couldn't both gather food and protect her child from snakes, birds, or dragons. Everyone in the group had to pitch in. Anthropologists call this parenting. For Floresiensis, it wasn't optional. It was survival. Nighttime was terror. Imagine trying to sleep in a cave that might also be home to a 20-foot python. Fire was the only defense. But fire needs fuel, which meant constant gathering, even when predators lurked outside. Let the flames die, and you became part of the food chain again. Storms and weather were another nightmare. Tropical winds strong enough to rattle our windows could literally blow away a creature weighing 50 pounds. Floodwaters that would be ankle deep for us could be chest deep for them. Surviving the wet season, the dry season. The endless cycle of hardship meant constant adaptation. Then there were volcanoes. Flores has been volcanically active the entire time humans lived there. Lava flows, ash clouds, pyroclastic surges. Events no 3-foot tall human could possibly outrun. To Floresiensis, eruptions weren't geological wonders. They were instant death sentences. Yet somehow, the species endured eruption after eruption for hundreds of thousands of years. And finally, there was disease. With no medicine, no concept of germs, every scrape or cut could be lethal. Dental abscesses, parasites, fevers. The bones show evidence of constant suffering. Many individuals carried healed injuries that must have been agonizing, proving they lived in pain, often for years. Taken together, it paints a picture of a species surviving on the razor's edge. Every day was a test. Every decision could mean life or death. And yet, against all odds, they made it through not for decades or centuries, but for nearly 1 million years. One of the strangest parts of Homo floresiensis survival is how their culture managed to hold together despite their tiny numbers. Think about the knowledge gap. With maybe only a few hundred individuals alive at once, every elder carried irreplaceable wisdom. If the one person who knew how to shape the sharpest stone blades died before passing it on, that knowledge was gone forever. No writing. Probably no complex language. Just demonstration, memory, and repetition. And yet, the tool tradition stayed remarkably stable. For hundreds of thousands of years, they made the same stone tools the same way, the same proportions, the same methods, across generations, across entire eras of climate change. That kind of cultural continuity suggests their ability to pass down skills was rock solid, even with brains smaller than chimps. But survival wasn't just about tools, it was about logistics. They had no way to store food long term, no pottery, no drying racks, no preservation methods we can detect. On a tropical island, everything rots quickly. That meant every single meal had to be gathered or hunted fresh. There were no reserves for lean times, no stockpiles, just constant daily effort. Their weapons were limited too. No projectiles. They didn't have bows, atlails, or even reliable throwing spears. At best, they had thrusting spears, meaning every hunt was close quarters. You had to get near enough to stab your prey, which also meant your prey could kill you. Hunting a juvenile stegodon wasn't a safe long-distance strategy. It was getting close enough to jam a sharpened point into an animal that weighed hundreds of pounds. That kind of hunting required teamwork and bravery bordering on desperation. But it also meant every kill came with risk. Even navigation on the island itself was a challenge. When you're 3 feet tall, a stream that's ankle deep for us could be waist high for them. A fallen tree trunk could be an obstacle taller than your shoulders. Their mental maps of flaws would have looked completely different from ours. They lived in a scaled-up world, where every path, every barrier, every climb meant risk. The competition for shelter added to the danger. The good caves weren't theirs alone. Bears, snakes, giant birds, and even hyenas wanted them too. Leaving your cave for a hunt meant returning to find it occupied by something stronger, bigger, or hungrier. Home security was never guaranteed. Communication must have existed, but not in the way we think of language. Their brains were small, but their survival required coordination. Warnings, hunt planning, tool teaching. They had to communicate somehow, probably through gestures, expressions, and a handful of vocal sounds. Not grammar, not abstract words, but enough to say, danger, food here, help me. Even with those limits, the evidence shows they understood time and scheduling. The hunting patterns in the bones match prey behavior cycles. Juveniles were targeted when they were easiest to catch. Animals were ambushed near water at predictable hours. That's memory, that's planning. That's anticipating the future. For a species with brains the size of an orange, that level of strategy is nothing short of astonishing. The story of Homo floresiensis doesn't just play out in prehistory, it also exploded into modern science, and into one of the ugliest academic fights anthropology has ever seen. It began in 2003, inside Liangba Cave on Flores. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of a skeleton they called LB1, an adult female about 3 feet 6 inches tall, weighing maybe 55 pounds. Her skull was tiny, with a brain volume of just 400 cubic centimeters. At first glance, it didn't make sense. How could something this small, this primitive looking, survive until just 50,000 years ago? That's when modern humans were already painting caves in Europe. The announcement shocked the world. Newspapers dubbed her the Hobbit. But excitement quickly turned into controversy. Some scientists flat out refused to believe this was a new species. They argued LB1 wasn't Homo floresiensis at all, just a diseased modern human. The most common claim was microcephaly, a condition that causes abnormally small heads and brains. But there was a problem: microcephalics still have human-shaped wrists and feet. LB1's didn't. Her wrists looked like an ape's. Her feet were flat, long, and primitive, nothing like ours. Next came theories of dwarfism syndromes like Laron syndrome. But again, those conditions don't explain primitive bones in the wrist, or an ape-like trapezoid bone, or shoulder joints angled more like ancient hominins than modern humans. And besides, you don't find multiple dwarfed individuals spanning thousands of years in one cave. The pathology camp was grasping at straws. The strongest evidence against the disease idea came from the teeth and jaws. LB1's teeth weren't arranged like modern humans at all. They showed a mix of primitive features, some closer to Homo erectus, and unique traits never seen in us. Dental wear suggested a diet no modern human group has ever shared. Then came the foot bones. The navicular bone, which helps form the arch of the foot, was completely wrong for us. No arch, just a flat, primitive structure designed for a different kind of walk. Pathology doesn't rewrite your entire skeletal blueprint. Evolution does. CT scans of the skull added even more. The internal brain structure, the way the lobes were organized, wasn't just small, it was different. Certain areas linked to planning and reasoning were proportionally enlarged, despite the small overall size. That doesn't happen with disease. That happens with a brain built differently from the ground up. But the arguments didn't stop in journals. They turned into outright theft. In 2004, senior Indonesian paleoanthropologist Tuku Jacob literally removed the bones from their repository without permission. He kept them for months. When they were finally returned, they were damaged, the pelvis smashed, the skull scratched from bad casting, some finger bones missing entirely. Fossils that had survived underground for tens of thousands of years were ruined by human ego in less than 3 months. The scandal set off international outrage. Indonesia tightened fossil access laws. Collaborations broke down, and the fight over Homo floresiensis only grew louder. But over time, the evidence piled up. More fossils were found, more individuals, and all of them showed the same mix of strange, primitive features. Too consistent to be disease, too unique to be dismissed. By the late 2010s, the scientific consensus had shifted. Homo floresiensis was real, not a diseased human, not a freak accident, a genuine separate species of human that survived far longer than anyone thought possible. When Homo floresiensis was first described, the dating shocked everyone. Early estimates placed LB1 at only 18,000 years old. If true, it would mean these tiny humans survived on Flores, while modern humans were already spreading across the globe, farming in some regions, and making art in others. The overlap would have been enormous. Later tests pushed that date back. The bones themselves are now placed closer to 50,000 years ago. That might not sound like a big jump, but it changes everything. Instead of living side by side with modern humans for tens of thousands of years, the two species may have just brushed past each other, or maybe not met at all. But here's the problem: the archaeological layers tell a suspicious story. For almost 1 million years, Floresiensis fossils, tools, and fire traces appear consistently in caves like Liangbar. Then, suddenly, they vanish. Right after that, modern human artifacts appear, no overlap, no slow fade. One disappears, the other takes its place. Coincidence, maybe. But the timing is too perfect. If modern humans reached Flores around 50,000 years ago, which evidence suggests they did, then the extinction of Floresiensis happened right on cue. Whether it was competition, direct violence, or disease, the pattern looks less like random chance and more like replacement. The disease theory is grim but likely. Modern humans carried pathogens we'd picked up from thousands of years of mixing with animals, with each other, with Neanderthals and Denisovans. Floresiensis had been isolated for nearly 1 million years. Their immune systems would have been namavi, unprepared. Something as mild as the flu, which barely slows us down, could have ripped through their tiny population and left no survivors. Then there's competition. Modern humans hunted differently. They had throwing spears, possibly at louts, maybe even early bows. They could strike from a distance. Floresiensis had to get up close. When both groups targeted the same prey, like juvenile stegodons, the modern humans would have had the advantage every single time. In a small population, even losing a few hunts in a row could mean starvation. And of course, there's the possibility of conflict. Direct violence. We don't have fossil proof. No embedded spear points, no obvious war wounds. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. If our ancestors saw Floresiensis as competitors, or even as strange others, it's not hard to imagine confrontations that didn't end well for the smaller species. The extinction pattern is abrupt. They thrived for hundreds of thousands of years, survived volcanoes, predators, storms, and starvation. Then modern humans arrive, and within what looks like a single generation, they're gone. The truth may never be proven, but the simplest explanation is also the harshest: we replaced them. And Flores isn't alone. Across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, there are similar myths of little people. Hairy, strange, human, like but not quite human. Were these all just coincidences? Or could every island have had its own hidden population of ancient humans, only remembered in story after they vanished? We may never know. Every expedition searching for evidence of living populations comes back empty-handed. Every sighting turns out to be macaques, or nothing at all. But still, the thought lingers. If Floresiensis really did survive until the last few centuries, then extinction didn't happen 50,000 years ago. It happened almost yesterday. And if that's true, then our species shared the planet with another kind of human much more recently than we ever imagined. For all we've learned about Homo floresiensis, the gaps in the story are just as important as the fossils. Start with the burial problem. For nearly 1 million years of existence, we've found no clear graves, no deliberate burials, no evidence of ritual treatment of the dead. Where did all the bodies go? even with poor preservation in the tropics, we should see more than a handful of skeletons. It raises the possibility that they practice disposal methods we can't detect, leaving bodies in water, abandoning them in the open, or something else entirely. Then there's the archaeological record itself. For hundreds of thousands of years, the caves of Flores tell a consistent story: stone tools, fire traces, butchered bones, steady cultural continuity, and then nothing. It doesn't taper off. It doesn't decline slowly. It just stops. One layer has Floresiensis, the next has modern humans. No overlap, no transition. That sharp break is one of the most puzzling things about their extinction. It looks less like a species fading out and more like a switch being flipped. The absence of symbolic behavior is another enigma. Every other human species that made tools this sophisticated left behind something abstract: Neanderthal carvings, early Homo sapiens art, beads, pigments. Homo floresiensis, as far as we know, left none of it. No drawings, no jewelry, no ornaments. Either they express themselves in ways that don't survive, music, body paint, something perishable, or their cognitive wiring just didn't push them towards symbolism. And that's what makes their survival so strange. They lack the things we usually consider markers of advanced humanity: art, ritual, language. Yet they thrive longer than almost any other human species. The unanswered questions pile up. Were they peaceful, or did they fight each other? Did they mourn their dead, or simply abandon them? Did they ever meet modern humans? And if so, what happened in those encounters? The silence in the record doesn't give us answers, but it makes the mystery deeper. The real shock about Homo floresiensis isn't just that they survived, it's how much they accomplished with so little. Start with the tools. In Langbua Cave alone, archaeologists uncovered over 10,000 stone artifacts, not random rocks. Purpose-built blades, scrapers, perforators, and even microliths, tiny, sharp flakes likely hafted onto wooden shafts to make composite tools. That means they weren't just banging stones together, they were designing systems. Wood and stone combined into weapons sharper and deadlier than either material alone. And it wasn't a fluke. At Matamenge, a site 50 miles away, tools nearly identical in design were found, dated to 40,000 years ago. That's almost 1 million years of technological continuity. In that same stretch of time, other human species went from crude choppers to cave paintings. Floresiensis found something that worked and stuck with it, passing the knowledge down through countless generations. Then there's fire. The evidence is clear: charred bones, fire, cracked stones, ash layers. They weren't just using fire, they were controlling it. That takes planning. You need to gather fuel ahead of time, maintain the flame, understand cause and effect, all from a brain volume smaller than a chimpanzee's, and their fire use wasn't random. In Liangba, most of the burned bones are from juvenile stegodons, carefully chosen. Smaller, easier to kill, easier to carry, easier to roast. That's deliberate decision-making, risk versus reward calculation. Big adults meant more meat, but also more danger. Juveniles gave the best trade-off. Their hunting strategies back this up. The cut marks on stegodon bones aren't scattered like scavenging. They're systematic, placed exactly where muscles attach, exactly where butchering is most efficient. That suggests not only hunting, but anatomical knowledge, an understanding of where to strike and how to take an animal apart. And the organization is striking. In Liangboa, tools weren't just left in piles. They were sorted. Blanks here, finished blades there, cores in another area. That's resource management, a kind of primitive workshop system. Someone was deciding what went where, keeping things ready for future use. This wasn't mindless survival. It was careful, structured, forward-looking. A group of tiny humans with orange-sized brains building fires, hunting elephants, and running tool economies that lasted nearly 1 million years. One of the strangest details about Homo floresiensis isn't what we find in their bones. It's what we don't find. Across 900,000 years of fossils, there's almost no sign of violence between individuals. No skulls with embedded weapons. No broken ribs from spear thrusts. No defensive injuries that suggest organized fighting. Compare that to Neanderthals and even early Homo sapiens, where weapon wounds are common. Floresiensis? Nothing. Maybe they were unusually peaceful. Or Maybe their numbers were so small that open conflict was simply unaffordable. In a population of a few hundred, you can't afford to lose people to fights. Every death, every injury, weakens the group's survival odds. Cooperation might not have been a cultural choice. It may have been forced by mathematics. And yet, for all their cooperation, they still vanished. The timeline is brutally clean. For hundreds of thousands of years, the caves of Flores show Floresiensis tools, bones, and fire. Then, suddenly, those layers stop. Right above them, new artifacts appear, made by modern humans. No overlap, no hybrid skeletons, no sign of mixing. It looks like a total replacement. The coincidence is hard to ignore. Floresiensis survived volcanic eruptions, climate swings, predators, and starvation. Nothing nature threw at them was enough to wipe them out. Then modern humans arrived. Within what looks like a single generation, Floresiensis disappears, and sapiens take their place. Was it violence? Was it competition for food? Or was it something invisible, like disease? The bones don't say. The silence is total, but the timing speaks volumes. When modern humans finally reached Flores around 50,000 years ago, the game was over. The difference between the two species wasn't just size or brain power. It was weapons. Floresiensis, at best, had thrusting spears tipped with sharp stone. Effective, but only if you got within arm's reach of your prey. Dangerous work when your prey is a 1,000-pound stegodon, or a giant bird with a 6-foot wingspan. Modern humans arrived with projectile weapons, spears that could be thrown from a distance, and maybe even early atlatls or bows. Suddenly, hunts that required life, risking close contact for Floresiensis, became safe and efficient for sapiens. Every stegodon calf killed by modern humans was one less available to the island's native population. It wasn't just weapons. Modern humans had complex language. They could plan hunts in detail, coordinate over long distances, share strategies across generations. Floresiensis may have had basic vocalizations or gestures, but nothing close to the grammar and abstraction of full human speech. That gap meant sapiens could organize them every time. And once the balance tipped, the island's ecosystem shifted fast. The animals Floresiensis had relied on for hundreds of thousands of years, stegodons, giant storks, even certain rat species, vanished from the fossil record around the same time, extinct or overhunted. Their disappearance stripped away the foundation of Floresiensis survival. No volcanic eruption, no sudden climate collapse, just the arrival of a new human armed with sharper weapons, better communication, and an appetite for the same resources. Within a geological blink, Floresiensis was gone, replaced by us. When we look at the environment around 50,000 years ago, something stands out. There was no catastrophic climate shift, no massive volcanic eruption, no sea level change big enough to transform Flores. The ecosystem that had supported Floresiensis for nearly 1 million years was still intact. And yet, that's exactly when they vanish. The only new factor in the equation was us, modern humans. Our arrival lines up almost perfectly with their disappearance. That timing is too precise to be a coincidence. Floresiensis had survived ice ages, storms, predators, and constant scarcity. They lasted through events that wiped out other species entirely. But within a few thousand years, maybe even just a few hundred, of sapiens showing up, they were gone. The simplest explanation is also the harshest: we replaced them. Whether it was direct violence, competition for resources, or invisible killers like disease, Floresiensis disappears at the exact moment modern humans appear in their caves. The archaeological record doesn't show a slow fade. It shows an abrupt swap, one human species out, another in, and that eerie overlap forces a haunting question. If we were capable of erasing another kind of human the moment we encountered them, how many others did we erase before history even began? For a while, researchers wondered if traces of Homo floresiensis still lived on in the people of Flores. The Rampasasa pygmies, who live not far from Liangboa, average under 5 feet tall. It was tempting to think they might carry hobbit DNA. But genetic tests told a different story. The Rampasasa are fully modern humans. Their short stature comes from a mutation in the growth hormone receptor gene, not from ancient ancestry. In other words, their resemblance to Floresiensis is pure coincidence, a case of convergent evolution. Still, the legends refuse to die. We already talked about the Ibugogo stories. the small, hairy cave dwellers who stole food and mimicked human speech. The details match Floresiensis too closely for comfort. Long arms, potbellies, awkward gait, strange voices, and the timeline is what makes it so unsettling. The Nage people say the Ibu Gogo survived until just a few centuries ago. The last groups, according to local tradition, were cornered in caves and burned alive in the 1800s. That would mean Floresiensis didn't go extinct 50,000 years ago. They survived into recorded history, sharing an island with us until practically yesterday. Skeptics argue that myths exaggerate, that these were just folk tales of wild forest spirits. But oral traditions can be astonishingly accurate. Aboriginal stories in Australia describe coastlines and sea levels from 10,000 years ago. If those memories can last, why not 50,000? The possibility hangs there, unresolved. Maybe the last hobbits of Flores didn't die out with the ice ages. Maybe they lingered long enough for our own ancestors to tell stories about them, and maybe those stories are all that remains. The fossils of Homo floresiensis should have answered questions. Instead, they sparked decades of arguments. When the first skeleton, LB1, was discovered in 2003, it was clear she wasn't just a small modern human. Her bones were wrong in too many ways. Ape-like wrists, oversized feet, primitive shoulders. But not everyone wanted to believe it. The fiercest critic was T. Jacob, Indonesia's most senior paleoanthropologist at the time. Instead of joining the study, he took the fossils from the repository without permission, insisting they were simply diseased modern humans. For months, no one else could study them. When the bones were finally returned, they were damaged, the pelvis crushed, the skull scratched from botched casting attempts, and several teeth missing. Fossils that had survived 18,000 years underground had been ruined in less than a season of human custody. Even after the damage, the arguments raged. Some researchers claimed LB1 suffered from microcephaly, a genetic disorder causing small brains. But microcephalics don't have ape-like wrist bones or Australopithecus-style feet. Others suggested dwarfism, like Laron syndrome. But that doesn't explain the primitive anatomy either. Piece by piece, every pathology theory fell apart. The teeth showed roots and wear patterns unknown in modern humans. The foot bones lacked arches, making them flat and awkward, unlike any living population. CT scans of the inner ear showed balanced structures completely different from ours. In short, Floresiensis wasn't diseased. They were different, a separate branch of humanity that had survived into surprisingly recent times. But without DNA, the fight continues. Every attempt to extract genetic material from the bones has failed. Tropical heat and humidity destroyed it long ago. We can measure, we can scan, we can cast, but we can't read their code. And that means we still can't answer the biggest questions. Where exactly did they come from? Were they descended from Homo erectus? Or an even earlier ancestor? Could they have interbred with us? For now, the answers remain locked away, in bones that are damaged, and in DNA that is probably gone forever. Flores wasn't the only island running its own human experiment. In 2019, scientists working in the Philippines uncovered bones from yet another small-bodied species, Homo luzonensis. Just like Floresiensis, they had a strange mix of traits, some primitive, some advanced, all adding up to something entirely different. And like the hobbits, they survived until about 50,000 years ago, the same moment modern humans were spreading through the region. Put that together, and a picture starts to emerge. Island after island in Southeast Asia may have had its own unique human population. Flores had Floresiensis. Luzon had Luzonensis. Who knows how many others lived and vanished before we even noticed? Folklore across the islands hunts at it. Every culture seems to have stories of small forest people, long-armed, hairy, cave-dwelling, sometimes mischievous, sometimes dangerous. It's tempting to dismiss these as myths. But when so many islands tell the same kind of story, and when we now know at least 2 hobbit species were real, it raises the question, how many legends are actually memories? And then there's the archaeology itself. Flores alone has hundreds of unexplored caves. Many are buried in jungle or sealed by volcanic debris. Every year, development covers more of them with concrete and farmland. For all we know, more fossils are sitting just meters below the surface, evidence of other humans we've never even imagined. Homo floresiensis broke the idea that human evolution was simple and linear. Homo luzonensis drove the point home. This wasn't a single ladder to modern humanity. It was a whole tangled bush of species, branching, shrinking, adapting, and sometimes surviving in isolation for hundreds of thousands of years. And the truth is, we've probably only found a fraction. You'd think a discovery this groundbreaking would change everything, that scientists would throw endless resources at it. But in reality, the study of Homo floresiensis has been slowed down by politics, funding, and even tourism. After the first announcement in 2004, Flores went from a quiet, little-known island to an instant tourist hotspot. Hotels sprang up near Liangba. Tour guides who'd never heard of the species before were suddenly selling Hobbit cave tours. And with every footstep, fragile evidence risked being trampled or lost. Then there were the fights over ownership. Local communities argued they should control access to the fossils as part of their heritage. The Indonesian government wanted to leverage the discovery for tourism money, and scientists just wanted open access to study. Each side had valid claims, but the result was bureaucratic deadlock. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. Flores has hundreds of unexplored caves, but every year new roads, farms, and construction projects cover them up forever. Fossil sites vanish under concrete before anyone even knows they're there. And then there's the money problem. Billions are spent chasing life on Mars, but archaeology budgets scrape by on scraps. A single space mission costs more than every hominin dig combined. We're pouring fortunes into searching other planets while barely investing in uncovering the other humans who shared this one. The sad truth is that the biggest obstacle to solving the mystery of Homo floresiensis isn't nature. It's us. One of the strangest twists in the story comes from experimental archaeology, where modern researchers try to recreate ancient tools. You'd think we could easily copy what Homo floresiensis made. After all, we've got bigger brains, better hands, modern labs, and years of training. But when archaeologists attempt to nap stone the way Floresiensis did, they often fail. The edges aren't as sharp. The durability isn't the same. The angles don't match. It turns out their anatomy may have been the secret. Their strange wrists and broad fingers gave them grips and strike angles we don't naturally use. What felt awkward for us was natural for them. Their bodies and tools evolved together, perfectly matched across hundreds of thousands of years. And their consistency is almost eerie. From 800,000 years ago to 50,000 years ago, their toolkits hardly changed. Same shapes, same flake angles, same manufacturing style. To us, that looks like a lack of innovation, but it might actually show the opposite, that they'd found something so effective, there was no need to reinvent it. Every stone flake was a piece of accumulated knowledge, passed down across thousands of generations. Without writing, without schools, without complex language, they still managed to preserve a tradition that lasted nearly 1,000,000 years. Modern humans can't say the same. Our technology changes so fast that even a few generations can barely understand each other's tools. But Floresiensis found stability, and that stability might have been their greatest achievement. If politics and money weren't enough, there's another enemy closing in: time itself. Flores sits in the tropics, hot, wet, acidic soil, the very worst environment for preserving bone and DNA. Every year that passes, what little evidence remains decays further. Fossils that survived underground for hundreds of thousands of years are crumbling faster now than ever before. And then there's climate change. Rising seas will flood coastal caves that might still hold untouched layers of history. More intense storms will wash out dig sites. Higher temperatures speed up the breakdown of bone and stone alike. Even the geology works against us. The same limestone caves that preserved Floresiensis also destroy bones with acidic water over time. Many skeletons may have already dissolved completely, leaving no trace. Meanwhile, human development is paving over potential sites before anyone can even check. A single road project or farm expansion can erase caves that held secrets for nearly 1,000,000 years. Once gone, those records of the past aren't coming back. We like to imagine archaeology as slowly piecing together an ancient puzzle. But here, the puzzle pieces aren't just missing. They're melting away while we're still looking for them. For over a century, Scientists assumed intelligence was about brain size. Bigger brains meant smarter species. Smaller brains meant primitive, limited thinking. Homo floresiensis blows that idea apart. Their brains were around 400 cubic centimeters, smaller than a chimpanzee's, closer to a 3-million-year-old Australopithecus than to us. By every traditional measure, they shouldn't have been capable of much at all. And yet, the evidence says otherwise. They made sharp stone blades, hafted microliths onto wooden shafts, butchered elephants, controlled fire, and organized group hunts. They showed forward planning, cost-benefit decision-making, and long-term cultural continuity. In other words, they behaved like humans, with a brain the size of an orange. That raises a staggering possibility. Maybe intelligence isn't about raw size. Maybe it's about wiring, efficiency, organization. Their Broadman Area 10, the region linked to planning and reasoning, was proportionally as large as ours. Perhaps they achieved with streamlined circuitry what we do with raw processing power. It's a reminder that consciousness might not require the massive brain we take for granted, and it forces us to rethink the way we define intelligence in other species, and even in artificial intelligence. If Floresiensis could survive nearly 1 million years with a brain half the size of ours, maybe we're overcomplicating what it takes to think, to plan, to adapt. They were proof that being human isn't just about brain volume, it's about what you do with it. When Homo floresiensis vanished, they didn't just take their bones with them. They took 900,000 years of knowledge we'll never get back. Think about it. They knew every inch of floors, every edible plant, every seasonal water source, every cave that was safe and every one that wasn't. They survived volcanic eruptions, floods, predators, droughts, things that wiped out other species entirely. And they did it with nothing but stone tools, fire, and shared memory. That's a survival manual we'll never read. Even their biology might have carried secrets. Small island populations often develop unique genetic solutions to harsh environments. Floresiensis survived tropical diseases, food scarcity, constant predation. Their bodies may have carried adaptations to metabolism, immunity, even longevity. If we had their DNA, maybe we'd find new ways to treat disease, maybe even unlock cures. But the genes are gone, erased by time and climate. What remains are only hints. Wear marks on their teeth that show how they use their mouths as extra tools. Charred bones that prove they mastered cooking in wet, humid conditions where keeping fire alive is almost impossible. Healed fractures that tell us they cared for each other when injured, rather than abandoning the weak. It's all fragments, just enough to see that they solve problems we can barely imagine, and that those solutions died with them. We like to think of extinction as losing animals, losing biodiversity. But with Floresiensis, what we lost was another version of humanity, another way to think, to live, to survive. And that loss might be greater than we realize. The discovery of Homo floresiensis didn't just spark debates in science, it also stirred up politics, identity, and ownership. The fossils were found on floors, but suddenly scientists from all over the world wanted a piece of them. The local Manggarai people argued the remains were part of their heritage, that they should decide who studied them and how. The Indonesian government saw tourism potential, turning Liang Boa into the Hobbit cave and promoting it as a global attraction. Meanwhile, foreign researchers wanted free access to study the fossils without restrictions. Each side had valid reasons, but together it created constant tension. Who gets to speak for Homo floresiensis? Who owns the story of a species that lived long before modern nations or borders even existed? And behind it all, there's the shadow of colonialism in science. Too often, fossils are dug up in poorer countries, then shipped abroad and locked in labs half a world away. Local voices get sidelined. Communities who live closest to the discoveries are left out of the conversation. Floresiensis became a flashpoint for these frustrations. Even today, debates continue about access, ownership, and control. The Hobbit bones are more than just fossils. They're symbols of larger struggles over history, identity, and who gets to decide what humanity's story really means. Not everyone was ready to accept the hobbits. Creationists hated the discovery from the start. For years, they'd argued human evolution was a simple, single-story apes on one side, modern humans on the other, nothing in between. But Floresiensis didn't fit that picture. They weren't diseased humans. They weren't apes. They were something else entirely. Proof that human history is far more complicated than a straight line. So the pushback began. Lawsuits, protests, endless claims that the fossils were fakes or misinterpreted. But the evidence was overwhelming. Multiple individuals, spanning thousands of years, all showing the same mix of primitive and modern traits. And where the facts didn't reach, conspiracies rushed in. Some claimed governments were covering up the truth, hiding evidence of living populations in remote jungles. Others insisted the hobbits were aliens, time travelers, or the result of secret experiments. The stranger the theory, the more it spread online. Part of the reason is that Floresiensis is unsettling. They were human, but not us. Close enough to recognize, but different enough to feel alien. It's easier for many to reject them, or reframe them into something fantastical, than to accept that our family tree is crowded with species we barely understand. And maybe that's the most important thing about them. Floresiensis forces us to admit how much we don't know, and how much we may never know. The next generation of researchers has better tools than ever, but less time to use them. New imaging methods like micro-CT scans let scientists peek inside bones without damaging them, revealing growth patterns, hidden injuries, even blood vessel traces. Isotope analysis of teeth can now track what an individual ate season by season, and where they traveled across the island. Ancient protein studies are starting to unlock clues from fossils too old for DNA. All of it is giving us a sharper picture of Floresiensis. Not just what they looked like, but how they lived. But there's a catch. The sites themselves are vanishing. Every year, new roads cut through potential caves. Farms expand. Hotels rise. The tropical climate continues to eat away at what's left. For young scientists, it's a race to apply the newest methods before the evidence disappears forever. And while the tech keeps improving, the funding doesn't. Archaeology still runs on scraps compared to other sciences. Students and early career researchers often struggle just to get grants big enough to dig a single season. So the future of Floresiensis research is a strange mix of hope and desperation. We've never had such powerful tools to study them, and we've never been closer to losing the chance completely. The people of Flores aren't the only ones with stories about small, strange humans. Across Indonesia and the Philippines, folklore repeats the same themes. Hairy little people with long arms, awkward hunched walks, strange, mumbling voices that sounded almost human. Some were said to steal food, others kidnapped children. Almost all of them lived in caves or dense forests. Different islands, different cultures, but the stories echo each other. Too similar to be pure coincidence. Either everyone invented the same myth independently, or they were all describing the same kind of being. For many anthropologists, these tales are uncomfortable. If they're true, they suggest Homo floresiensis, or something like them, might have survived much later than the fossil record shows. Maybe not 50,000 years ago, maybe a few thousand, maybe even into the last few centuries. And while that sounds impossible, remember, Aboriginal oral traditions in Australia describe landscapes and sea levels from over 10,000 years ago with remarkable accuracy. Human memory is far deeper than we often give it credit for. So when local people say their grandparents told stories of the Ibu Gogo, it raises a question we don't want to answer. What if Floresiensis didn't vanish when we think they did? Even if the legends hold a grain of truth, finding proof gets harder every year. Flores is changing fast. Rising seas will drown coastal caves. Tropical storms will collapse cliffside shelters. Heat and humidity are already breaking down the few bones we've recovered. In some cases, the fossils aren't slowly eroding. They're literally crumbling in storage the moment they're exposed to air. And the jungle doesn't wait. Thick vegetation hides caves, while acidic soils eat away at what's buried inside. Every rainy season means more potential sites washed away, more layers destroyed before anyone can study them. Add in human development, roads, farms, tourism, and the problem multiplies. A hotel or rice field built in the wrong spot can erase thousands of years of evidence in days. We like to imagine the past as fixed, waiting patiently for us to uncover it. But here the past is slipping through our fingers. Every year the trail grows fainter. Every season, more of Homo floresiensis is gone for good. If there are answers out there about who they really were, how they lived, and how long they survived, the window to find them is closing fast. Flores wasn't the only island running its own evolutionary experiment. In 2019, scientists announced Homo luzonensis, another small-bodied human species from the Philippines. Different island, different fossils, but the same strange pattern. Primitive traits mixed with modern ones, tiny bodies, tiny teeth, and survival lasting until around 50,000 years ago. That means Floresiensis wasn't an outlier. They were part of a bigger picture, a whole region filled with unique human species, each adapting in isolation. Every island was its own laboratory, shaping humans in ways that don't fit neatly into our textbooks. It makes you wonder how many others might have existed. How many disappeared without leaving fossils? The caves of Indonesia and Southeast Asia are barely scratched compared to Europe or Africa. For all we know, dozens of unknown cousins lived and died here, their bones still hidden under volcanic ash or jungle soil. Flores and Luzon prove one thing beyond doubt. Our family tree isn't a straight trunk. It's a tangled forest, with branches sprouting, twisting, and breaking off all around us. And Homo floresiensis was one of the strangest, most resilient branches of all. Here's the frustrating part. We spend billions sending robots to Mars, chasing the faintest hints of microbial life. And yet, on our own planet, we've barely scratched the surface of human origins. Entire caves full of fossils are sitting unexplored, because there isn't enough money to dig. One Mars rover costs more than all hominin research combined. Think about that. We're pouring fortunes into searching for life light, years away, while ignoring the other kinds of humans who walked beside us right here on Earth. Flores alone has hundreds of unexplored caves. Every one of them could hold bones, tools, or even fire pits from species we don't yet know about. But development, erosion, and time are destroying them faster than archaeologists can get funding to look. It's not that space exploration isn't valuable. It is. But if we can spend billions to look outward, surely we can spare a fraction of that to look inward, into our own story, because Homo floresiensis shows us something crucial. We don't really understand our past. And if we don't act fast, we may never get the chance. Modern archaeologists have tried to recreate the tools of Homo floresiensis. On paper, they don't look complicated. Flakes, blades, microliths. But when researchers actually sit down with stone and hammer, something strange happens. We fail. The angles don't come out the same. The edges aren't as sharp. The durability isn't there. Even experts in stone knapping struggle to match what Floresiensis made routinely. Their strange anatomy, big flat feet, curved shoulders, ape-like wrists, might have given them different leverage, different grips, different motions we can't easily mimic. In other words, their tools weren't just about knowledge. They were about bodies built differently. The way they struck stone, the way they held and used tools, might have been something we literally can't copy because we don't move like them. That's what makes their toolkit so fascinating. It wasn't dumbed down technology from small-brained humans. It was a tradition, precise, efficient, and stable for nearly 1 million years. And today, with all our advantages, we still can't fully reproduce it. Even now, most classrooms still teach human evolution as a straight-line ape, be early human births, one neat, simple ladder. But Floresiensis breaks that ladder to pieces. They were alive while modern humans painted caves in Europe, while Neanderthals hunted mammoths, while Denisovans thrived in Asia. For tens of thousands of years, multiple kinds of humans coexisted, different bodies, different brains, different cultures, all at the same time. Yet textbooks barely mention it. Museums are slow to update displays. Teachers often don't even know the latest findings. So kids grow up thinking we're the only story, when in reality, we were just one of many. Homo floresiensis should change how we teach evolution. Not a straight march of progress, but a tangled forest of branches, some surviving, others ending, all shaping what humanity became. Until education catches up, most people will never realize just how strange, diverse, and crowded our past really was. Here's the part that refuses to go away: the stories. Every island in this region has them. Tales of small, strange people living in the forests, stealing food, speaking in odd, broken voices. In Flores, they call them the Ibu Gogo. In the Philippines, other names appear. Across Indonesia, the details shift, but the pattern repeats. Skeptics say myths are just myths, but the similarities are too sharp, too consistent. Either dozens of cultures invented the same story by chance, or they were all describing encounters with something real. And that's what unsettles scientists most. Because if even part of these oral traditions are accurate, it means Homo floresiensis may have survived far longer than the bones suggest. Maybe thousands of years longer. Maybe long enough for our ancestors to actually meet them. It's a possibility nobody wants to rule out. But nobody wants to admit either. The end of Homo floresiensis wasn't just about one species vanishing. It reshaped the entire island. When they disappeared, so did their pressure on the ecosystem. Juvenile stegodons, the dwarf elephants they hunted, suddenly had a higher chance of surviving. Rat populations exploded without their constant hunting. Plants they once foraged grew unchecked. Even the caves they left behind were quickly taken over by other animals, and eventually modern humans. In the fossil layers, the change is abrupt. One moment you see Floresiensis tools and bones. The next, they're gone, replaced by modern human artifacts. No slow fade, no overlap, just a sudden handoff. And the timing isn't coincidence. Modern humans arrive, and almost immediately, the hobbits vanish. Whether through competition, disease, or direct conflict, the result was the same: a total ecological and cultural replacement. It wasn't just extinction. It was an entire way of life erased, leaving behind an island forever altered. When modern humans finally reached Flores, the odds were stacked. We carried weapons they couldn't match. Throwing spears, maybe even atlaus, tools that could kill from a safe distance. Floresiensis, at best, had thrusting spears. To bring down prey, they had to get close enough to stab it, close enough to get hurt. In any fight, the outcome was already decided. The gap wasn't just in weapons, it was in language. Modern humans had fully developed speech, complete with grammar, planning, and abstraction. Floresiensis, with their tiny brains and limited vocal tracts, probably relied on gestures and simple calls. Enough to hunt together, yes, but not enough to negotiate, strategize, or coordinate on our level. That meant no diplomacy, no alliances, no middle ground. Two species of humans met, but one had ranged weapons and full speech, and the other didn't. It wasn't a contest. It was survival tilted hopelessly in our favor. Here's the strangest part of all: the environment didn't change. When Homo floresiensis vanished, there was no volcanic eruption wiping them out. No sudden ice age. No catastrophic flood. The island that had supported them for almost 1 million years was still the same. Forests, rivers, prey animals, caves. Nothing in nature forced them out. The only thing that changed was us. Modern humans arrived, and almost immediately, Floresiensis disappears from the record. It wasn't slow. It wasn't gradual. One layer in the caves shows hobbit bones and tools. The next layer shows ours, and that's it. Maybe it was direct conflict. Maybe it was disease. Maybe it was just competition for food. But whatever the cause, the timing is too sharp to ignore. For 900,000 years, they survived predators, droughts, storms, and volcanic eruptions. But the moment we showed up, their story ended. If it wasn't the land or the climate that killed them, then it had to be us. But how? One theory is disease. Modern humans carried pathogens picked up from other regions. Viruses, bacteria, parasites, after nearly 1 million years of isolation. Homo floresiensis would have had no defenses. Something as ordinary as the flu could have been apocalyptic. Even a small outbreak could have shattered their already fragile population. Another theory is competition. We were better hunters. Throwing spears meant more kills, faster kills, safer kills. Every animal we took was one they didn't get. For a population already living on the edge, losing just a little food, each season might have been enough to push them past the tipping point. And then there's the most uncomfortable possibility: violence. We have no direct evidence, no spear points in their bones, no massacre sites. But absence of evidence isn't proof of innocence. If conflicts happen, their tiny, fragile skeletons in a tropical climate wouldn't preserve the scars. So maybe we outcompeted them. Maybe we infected them. Maybe we killed them outright. Or maybe it was all three. Could we have lived alongside them? The idea is tempting. Two kinds of humans sharing an island, trading knowledge, maybe even helping each other. But the evidence says no. For one thing, the communication gap was too wide. Modern humans had full speech. Floresiensis likely didn't. How do you negotiate territory or share resources if you can't truly talk to each other? Misunderstandings would have been constant and dangerous. Then there's the resource problem. Flores is small. Its animals were already downsized. Dwarf elephants, giant rats, giant storks. There was barely enough to sustain one species of human hunter-gatherers. Two species competing for the same limited prey. That balance could never last. And finally, the weapons gap made things one-sided. We could kill from a distance. They had to risk their lives up close. In any confrontation, they'd lose. So no, peaceful coexistence was never really on the table. When modern humans stepped onto Flores, it wasn't just a meeting. It was a countdown. When you line up the evidence, the picture isn't pretty. Homo floresiensis survived almost 1 million years. They endured predators, droughts, volcanic eruptions, and endless scarcity. But within a blink of modern humans arriving, they were gone. That timing isn't coincidence. It's a pattern. Neanderthals vanish not long after we show up. Denisovans fade out too. And here on Flores, the same story repeats. Everywhere our species expands, other humans disappear. So maybe Homo floresiensis wasn't just another extinction. Maybe they were our first. Not by intention, perhaps. Not some grand campaign. But by disease, by competition, by weapons, by sheer presence. We erased them. A whole branch of humanity, gone. That makes their loss harder to dismiss. Because their story isn't just about the past. It's about us, and the shadows of what it means to be the only humans left. The discovery of Homo floresiensis should have been one of the greatest moments in anthropology. Instead, it turned into chaos. In 2004, Indonesian paleoanthropologist Toku Jacob, one of the most senior voices in the field, simply took the bones from the official repository. No paperwork, no permission. Just walked out with them. For months, nobody else had access. When the fossils finally came back, they weren't the same. The pelvis was smashed. The skull had scratches and chips from bad casting attempts. Some teeth were missing. Finger bones were gone completely. Think about that. These remains survived underground for nearly 1 million years. They endured volcanic eruptions, storms, predators, and time itself. But in the hands of humans, they were permanently damaged in less than 3 months. Why would Jacob risk his entire reputation? Because the bones contradicted everything he had argued for decades. That Indonesia showed a smooth, continuous line from Homo erectus to modern humans. Floresiensis shattered that narrative, and rather than accept it, he tried to control it. What we lost in those months can never be recovered. Pieces of their story, literally, were destroyed by academic ego. The fight over the bones didn't just end in the lab. It spilled into politics, tourism, and even local identity. After the damage scandal, the Indonesian government tightened control over fossils. International teams faced stricter oversight. Local communities demanded a say in how discoveries were handled. And suddenly, Homo floresiensis wasn't just science. It was heritage and money. The Langbor Cave, once a quiet excavation site, turned into a tourist hotspot almost overnight. Hotels popped up. Tour guides who had never heard of the hobbits before were suddenly selling tickets. Crowds trampled the same ground where researchers were still trying to work. For the Manggarai people of Flores, the cave was part of their land and their stories. For the government, it was an opportunity for tourism revenue. For scientists, it was an irreplaceable site they needed to protect. Everyone had a claim. Nobody had full control. And just like that, a tiny species that had been unknown to the world for nearly 1 million years became the center of a very modern struggle over ownership, money, and power. For all we've learned from their bones, the biggest mystery of Homo floresiensis remains locked away: their DNA. For 2 decades, researchers have tried. Every new method, every improved technique, every lab breakthrough has been thrown at these fossils. And every time, the result is the same nothing. The tropical climate of Flores is brutal on genetic material: heat, humidity, and acidic soils shred DNA into fragments too small to read. Neanderthal DNA survives in the cold caves of Europe. Denisovan DNA clung to a pinky bone in Siberia. But Flores gives us nothing, and without DNA, the biggest questions stay unanswered. Were they descended from Homo erectus that shrank on the island? Or from some earlier migration out of Africa? Could they interbreed with us? How diverse were their populations? We hold their bones in our hands, but the code that could solve everything, their genome, is gone, like a book where every page has been erased, leaving only the cover behind. For years, skeptics dismissed Homo floresiensis as a fluke, a disease, a deformity, an error in interpretation. But then came the Denisovans. In Siberia, from nothing more than a single finger bone and a tooth, scientists uncovered a whole new branch of humanity. DNA proved they were real, and not only real, but that they had left their mark in us. Millions of people alive today still carry Denisovan genes. That discovery forced a rethink. If an entire human species could be hidden in a single cave in Siberia, why couldn't Flores have its own unique humans? Suddenly, the idea of hobbits surviving until 50,000 years ago didn't seem so impossible. And the more we looked, the more patterns appeared. The Philippines revealed Homo luzonensis, another tiny human species, living at almost the exact same time. It wasn't just Flores. The whole region was alive with evolutionary experiments, small, isolated humans adapting to their islands in ways we'd never imagined. What once sounded like fantasy began looking like reality. Here's the bitter truth. We've probably only scratched the surface of their story. Flores alone has hundreds of caves, most unexplored. Thick jungle swallows entrances. Volcanic ash buries entire sites. Acidic soil destroys bones before we ever see them. For every skeleton found, dozens, maybe hundreds, have already been lost. And then there's the money. Space exploration gets billions. Human origins research, pennies. One Mars rover costs more than every excavation of early humans combined. We're willing to chase life on other planets, while ignoring the other kinds of humans who once lived right here. Development makes it worse. Roads cut through fossil beds. Hotels rise on unexcavated land. Farming reshapes landscapes that might still hide evidence. Every year, another piece of their history disappears under concrete or crops. We're in a race against time, and we're losing. To understand how Homo floresiensis survived, archaeologists have tried to do what they did, remake their tools. On paper, it should be simple, sharp, edged stone blades, flakes, points. Nothing too advanced compared to later humans. But here's the surprise. We can't do it the way they did. Even skilled flint knappers, experts at replicating ancient techniques, struggle to reproduce the same sharpness, the same durability, the same precision. The edges dull too quickly. The strikes don't match. Something is missing. And that something may have been them. Their hands weren't shaped like ours. Their wrists were primitive, more ape-like, their grip different, their leverage unique. They weren't just making tools with our anatomy scaled down. They were making tools with a completely different toolkit built into their bodies, which means their technology wasn't just clever, it was specialized, designed around their unique biology. Tools made for their hands, not ours. Even our best attempts fall short. And in that failure, we get a glimpse of just how adapted, just how capable these hobbits really were. Walk into most classrooms, flip open a textbook, and you'll still see the old story, a neat ladder of evolution. Apes at the bottom, modern humans at the top. A straight line, each species replacing the one before. But Homo floresiensis blows that apart. Their fossils show that 50,000 years ago, the world wasn't home to just one kind of human. It was full of them. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, modern humans spreading everywhere. And these tiny hobbits holding on in Flores. Human evolution wasn't a line. It was a tangled bush, with branches overlapping, twisting, sometimes even crossing. The problem is education hasn't caught up. Museums still show outdated charts. Teachers often don't know the new findings. Kids grow up thinking human evolution was simple, when reality is far stranger and far more interesting. Homo floresiensis should have changed how we teach human origins. Instead, their story is mostly trapped in academic papers, while classrooms repeat the same old story. It's not just a missed detail, it's a missed chance to show students that our past is way more complex, way more mysterious than they've ever been told. Science isn't the only place their story lives. On Flores, local folklore speaks of the Ibu Gogo, small, hairy people with long arms, potbellies, and a strange, mumbling speech that could mimic human words. The match is uncanny. These stories say the Ibu Gogo stole food, raided gardens, even snatched children. Villagers would sometimes leave offerings outside just to keep them away. And in some versions, the last of them weren't wiped out until the 1800s, when they were trapped in a cave and burned alive. Now, scientists are cautious. Oral tradition usually doesn't stretch back tens of thousands of years. But then again, Australian Aboriginal stories have described landscapes and animals that disappeared over 10,000 years ago. And those accounts turned out to be accurate. So maybe, just maybe, the Ibu Gogo tales are more than myth. Maybe the memory of Homo floresiensis survived in local stories long after the last bones had turned to dust. As if time and politics weren't enough. There's another threat closing in: climate change. Flores, like much of the region, is vulnerable to rising seas. Coastal caves that might still hold fossils could be underwater within decades. Storms are getting stronger, eroding cliff faces and washing away layers of history. Heat and humidity accelerate the decay of bones already fragile from age. The irony is brutal. After surviving nearly 1 million years, the traces of Homo floresiensis might disappear not because of nature's patience, but because of our speed. In just a few generations, climate change could erase evidence that endured through ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and predator attacks. We're racing against forces bigger than us, and we're running out of time. Homo floresiensis forces us to rethink intelligence itself. A brain just 400 cubic centimeters, smaller than a chimp's, yet they controlled fire, hunted elephants, and survived nearly 1 million years. That shouldn't have been possible, and yet it was. Which makes you wonder, maybe intelligence isn't about size. Maybe it's about wiring, efficiency, and adaptability. It's the same question we ask with artificial intelligence today. Do you need a massive brain? Or just the right kind of brain? If the hobbits could achieve so much with so little, then maybe consciousness is simpler or more flexible than we've ever imagined. There's another haunting thought. Island species often evolve unique biology, strange resistances, unusual metabolisms, hidden adaptations. Homo floresiensis survived in conditions that should have killed them. What if their bodies held secrets we'll never recover? A genetic quirk against disease, a metabolism tuned for scarcity, even something that could have advanced medicine today. But with their DNA gone, those answers vanished forever. The bones of Homo floresiensis didn't just spark scientific fights. They ignited cultural ones. For the Manggarai people, these weren't just fossils. They were part of their land, their heritage. But suddenly outsiders controlled them. Scientists argued over access. Governments chased tourism money. Locals felt sidelined in their own history. In the end, Homo floresiensis became more than science. They became a symbol of who owns the past and who gets to tell the story. Of course, not everyone welcomed the discovery. Creationists attacked it immediately. If the hobbits were real, the old straight-line story of human origins fell apart, and they couldn't accept that. So the theories came: pathology, fraud, anything but a new species. And outside science, the conspiracies grew louder: secret living populations, government cover-ups, even claims that the hobbits were aliens or genetic experiments. The truth was strange enough. But where science hesitated, imagination filled the gap. Now, a new wave of researchers is stepping in. They have better tools: micro-CT scans, isotopic analysis, computer modeling. But the challenges are worse. The caves are collapsing. The fossils are fragile. Funding is scarce. They're trying to salvage what older generations missed before time and climate erased the rest. It's a race, and the finish line is closing fast. Homo floresiensis proved that the impossible can exist. Tiny bodies, tiny brains. An island full of predators. And yet they thrived for 900,000 years. They broke every rule we thought human evolution followed. They weren't a mistake or a curiosity. They were humans, in their own way, adapted, resilient, extraordinary. And then when modern humans arrived, they vanished. Not slowly, not gradually. Gone. Their silence leaves us with questions that may never be answered. What did they think? Did they understand their place? Did they know they were the last of their kind? We may never know. But their legacy is clear. Evolution is stranger, more twisted, and more mysterious than we imagine. And the story of humanity is not just ours. So the next time you light a fire, or make a tool, or share knowledge with someone else, remember, we're echoing instincts that began not with us, but with them. Homo floresiensis lived in ways we're only beginning to understand. Their bones are gone, their DNA is gone, but their legacy runs through the very idea of what it means to be human. They were real, they mattered, and in their absence, they still whisper across time, reminding us that our story was never simple, never straight, and never ours alone.